Hello everybody, MegaZardX here, back at it again to give you another very exciting video. And for today, we know there's been a lot of stuff going around with the Nintendo Switch 2. Oftentimes there's been a lot of misinformation from a lot of different people though. I don't know why. Some people just don't have the time to go ahead and just fact check or double check sources, just running through at least a couple or a few different sources at least though. But the main hot topic I think a lot of people has been upset about here recently is the whole thing with all of these physical games, quote unquote physical games, because we know that there's going to be some full games that might be coming on the cartridge, such as like Mario Kart World. We know Donkey Kong Bonanza will also be like that, along with a plethora of other Switch 2 edition games, such as like your Metroid Prime 4s or potentially even Pokemon Legends ZA. We know games like those are going to exist. That's all going to be on the cartridge, including some third-party companies, big one with Cyberpunk 2077. All of those will be fully on the cartridge. We know about that. However, as we've been starting to see more pre-orders open up day by day, and we saw a lot of these games announced at the, back in that original Nintendo Switch 2 presentation, and then since then some more companies managed to come out and say a few things though. But it seems like a vast, and I do mean a vast majority of all third-party games seems like they might be associated with that game key card. So it doesn't seem like all of it will be on the cartridge. It will be contingent on you still having access to the internet and still being able to go through and download a good chunk or portion of those games. So in today's video, I just want to kind of give my overall thoughts on it, just talk about all the games that are confirmed to be game key cards, games that we know that are going to be fully on the cartridge, the handful of those, and then kind of just give my overall feelings and impressions, because it definitely seems like Nintendo's given a lot of different companies, different avenues in terms of being able to put out their games though. But it seems like just the gaming industry as a whole, they're just trying to push a lot more people to the digital age. So we might as well go ahead and get up in it though. But if you hadn't already done so, make sure you go and hit that like button, go ahead and hit that subscribe button and that bell to stay up to date on all things video game related I feel like talking about and discussing. But without any further ado, let's go ahead and jump straight up into this video. So game key cards, what are these things? They're basically just little itty bitty cartridges that you would normally plop into your Nintendo Switch just in general, right? And there's gonna be some portion of the game actually on the cartridge, but it won't be the whole entire game itself that's on there. It's still going to be contingent on being able to download a good chunk of this from the internet. Now, if you think back to the original Nintendo Switch 1, a good chunk of all games were already on the cartridge. However, you had a few exceptions to those, and those were games such as those that were able to say, hey, it's not even a cartridge in the box, there's a code in the box. And that really rubbed off a lot of people off the wrong way though, and that kind of put off a lot of different people that typically are just diehard physical stands, like, look, I want everything on the cartridge. If it's gonna be digital, I ain't gonna even touch it. It kind of makes sense, because at that point it's like, well, why even bother with buying a code in the box unless you just like it showing up physically on your shelf? But at that point you might as well just buy it straight from the eShop. It's the same effect, whatever though. But I think the game key cards is like Nintendo solutions say, hey, look, we know how important third-party companies are in terms of putting out games on, their platform, because it's not like you're always going to have first-party games coming out every single month. Nintendo does a good job of doing it, mind you, though. But still, different strokes for different folks. You got to have a lot of diversity up on your console. So by having the game key cards, because I have a strong inkling or a feeling that some people might be thinking, some companies are lazy if they take this approach where it's like, hey, we're not putting all the game on the cartridge, we're doing the game key card. Some people might just say it's lazy. I would beg to differ. It's not that the fact that they're probably lazy, it's just more like the fact that they're cheap. Because when they start allocating out all of the different funds and stuff, like where all of this money starts going into, you have to think about this stuff from a business point perspective, mind you. I know it's easy to get caught up in just think about it purely from a fan's point, but you also got to think about it from a business point as well. Because if you're a third-party company such as like a Capcom, we'll use Street Fighter 6 as an example, because that is going to be confirmed as a game key card. Literally, they had to go around and say, hey, look, they had to pay X amount of gratuity towards Nintendo, say, hey, look, it costs X amount of money just to even put out their game on Nintendo's platform. So you got to give a good chunk of change to Nintendo. All right, so that's a little bit of the money out of the pocket, right? Then you got to turn around and buy these expensive cartridges. I know you're going to be mass buying them to try to get a somewhat decent deal up on there though, but we still don't know exactly like what are the file size cartridges that are going to be available for Nintendo Switch 2 cartridges, because mind you, Switch 1 cartridges, that's a completely different ecosystem. Yes, there were kind of some expensive ones. There was only like a handful of 32 gigabyte cartridges that were even used though. But with this being the Switch 2, and things are going to be moving a little bit quicker in terms of like the download speeds or the upload speeds, or not really download or upload, but more like the read and write speeds. That's what I'm trying to get at. With it being, that much of a bigger game file that you have to kind of read and write. I mean, these Switch 2 cartridges, they're almost going to be equivalent to like running some stuff with the SSD. That's one of the reasons why we have a micro SD express card that's equivalent to SSD, file read and write speeds that we have on the PS5 or the Xbox Series consoles right now, though. So I just think because of that extra little bit of, equipment tech that's in that cartridge, that might be one of the reasons why those cartridges are so expensive. So then, not only are you paying a little bit of money to Nintendo just to be able to put your game on the console, then you got to pay a little extra more money to buy these special proprietary cartridges that cost way more than just buying like a simple disc that you would put in a PS5 or an Xbox Series console. So you got that. Then you have to turn around and break a deal with the retailers on the other side where they have to get a chunk of change. You see where I'm getting at right now? There's a lot of different tiers that kind of go up into this business strategy, and they start losing a good chunk of what would be their profit margins before we even get to have the chance to buy from the retailer. It's because of reasons like that. I think that's the reason why a lot of companies might be opting into the game key cards, because that's just significantly more cheaper. Hence, it saves them a little bit more of the profit margins. Yes, it kind of sucks for diehard physical fans or people that just want to have the game physically so they don't have to worry about burning through too much of the console space. Mind you, because the Nintendo Switch 2, it's confirmed to only have 256 gigabytes, just starting off before you have to buy a micro SD express card, mind you. And even those are not necessarily super cheap. Like, I managed to get the 1 terabyte one though, but it still costs a good chunk of change or whatever though. But that's some things you have to kind of keep in mind with all of these game key cards. They're just doing it not because they're cheap, but they're doing it because of financially though. But let's go ahead and take a look and see all the games that are confirmed to be game key cards. So this big important fact right here is it's going to vary from region to region. All right, so I have a cool little graphic that's pulled up, because these are all the games that are confirmed to be third-party releases that are actually releasing in Japan. And whenever people started seeing this mess float around on Twitter and such, I mean, this is the point where people started kind of freak out just a little bit more so, like, dang, are we going to have all these big third-party games actually come out and put them on game key cards? But all of these games is as follows. We have Bravely Default, Flying Fairy, Damien X Machina, Titanic, Scion, asterisk on that one, Kitsune, Path of the Goddess, Puyo Puyo Tetris 2, Raidou Remaster, Shine Post, Be Your Idol, Sonic X Shadow Generation, Street Fighter 6, Suikoden 1 and 2 HD Remaster, Survival Kids, Yakuza 0 Director's Cut, Yeast 10, Proud Nordics, No Sleep for Kaname Day from AI Insomnia Files, and Split Fiction. All of those are game key cards. Now, let me go ahead and point this one out here real quick, because Split Fiction, interestingly enough, that's a game key card over there in Japan. However, for some oddball reason, for us over here in the West, that's going to be a code in the box. I don't know how in the world they got a game key card over there, and we have to happen to get a code in a box over here, though. That's just a little bit odd, though. But most companies are opting into the game key cards, and a few stubborn ones like Split Fiction, that's a code in the box. Oh, gosh dang it. I don't know why y'all so stubborn like that, though. But yeah, those are all games that are confirmed to come over here to Japan's region as game key cards. However, there are a few that vary from region to region that are actually going to get the whole game on the actual cartridge. So, like, for example, Damon X Machina, Titanic, Scion, that one is going to be all on the cartridge for us here in the West. That's where I guess the beautiful joy of having a non-region locked system comes into play. A different region in the world happens to have it all on the cartridge. You pay the import prices and stuff. I know tariffs and stuff is flying around though. Hey, you gotta do what you gotta do. Hustle a little bit if you want to get that, that full game on that cartridge, whatever though. Also, we managed to have Rune Factory, Guardians of Azuma. That's going to be all on the cartridge, and Story of Seasons is also going to be on the cartridge. I already talked about earlier how Cyberpunk 2077, that was already on the cartridge. They were kind of boasting in all their marketing strategy and stuff that they're using a 64 gigabyte cartridge and stuff like that. They might have managed to strike a special deal with Nintendo with them being, big CD Projekt Red and all. But we do know that that's probably one of the biggest third-party games in terms of just a sheer file size. That's all going to be on the cartridge though. So yeah, that's just a handful of games that we know that's actually going to be physical. That's not going to be associated with a game key card where you do have to download anything off of, off of the internet or whatever though. So yeah, so just looking at all of these different games, it's just kind of something, because we do know that most Nintendo first party games, like your Mario Kart Worlds, your Donkey Kong Bonanzas, or your Switch 2 editions with like Kirby and the Forgotten Land, Starcross World, Super Mario Party, Jamboree plus the TV mode, the Switch 2 editions of Breath of the Wild, Tears of the Kingdom, anything that's first party related, we should know that should be nearly guaranteed to be all on the cartridge. And it will have a few third parties like a CD Projekt Red with Cyberpunk 2077 that might all be on the cartridge though. But that's just only a few games. That whole other list I read from Japan with a few asterisks here and there that change from region to region, a good chunk of those third-party games are essentially game key cards, or you're just gonna have to rely on downloading a good chunk of those games off of the internet. And if that be the case, you know how quick that storage of that 256 gigabytes on that Switch 2 storage is going to fill up. It's going to fill up insanely quick, so much so to where now you're going to have to start kind of rotating out, which games you're going to have on your console at any given moment, and then you might have to archive and delete some download data from your console. You'll still have to save data, of course, though, but you're going to have to delete some stuff that make free for some other stuff. This is something that Xbox and PlayStation fans have been accustomed to for a good chunk of this generation and part of the last one, because they're used to, even if they have the games physically where all of the data is on the disc, still have to download the whole entire game up onto their consoles though. So yeah, so even though a lot of games are physical for some of those respective rival companies over there, they still kind of get treated in the digital format where, hey, you still gotta have space on the console to be able to download and install this thing up on there though. And with these game key cards, it's almost the same similar effect. And it's something that Nintendo fans hadn't really ever messed around with too much, unless you happen to be somebody like myself that has like a Switch and a PS5 or something like that. You have multiple consoles though. But if you've only been in the Nintendo ecosystem, you best be ready to pone up some, money for some micro SD express cards though, because some of this storage, depending on if this is the only way how you can play your third-party games, that storage can fill up pretty quick, mind you, though. So now it's going to be pretty important just based on storage file sizes. If most of your third-party games are going to be, essentially, you got to download them to the system. It's like you're going to have to manage and juggle quite a bit of stuff, though. And I feel like that's like the underlying details that not a lot of people are discussing about, is the fact that regardless of whether you get the game key cards or you're just going all digital, or you're doing pseudo physical and digital, maybe you're picking up all the first party games physically and then some of the third party games you happen to be picking up digitally or whatever though, it's important. I think storage space on your console is even going to be even more so important this time around with the Switch 2 than what it ever was with the Nintendo Switch 1. Man, I don't know. It's good, I would say, to always have options with anything that you can be able to put out in terms of your products for consumers. But having all these game key cards be like this, and essentially just saying, hey, look, you're just going to have to download and just have a bunch of space available digitally. This stuff is going to add up fairly quick. And then before you know it, you're just going to have a lot of people out there start looking around and say, oh, wait, I'm going to need some micro SD express cards. I just don't have enough space to have all the games that I want downloaded on this console at any given point, so I can quickly switch around and move around to different things though. I don't know, the way how they're doing all of this stuff, and now they implemented the virtual game cards and stuff, honestly, I know some people are just going to be diehard people that are just going to say, you know what, I just want all my games physical. I'm not going to bother with some digital games. But to me, I still care about the games. I don't care where I can play them. If I have to play them physical, cool. But that's what I do with all my first party games. If I had to get some things digital, Just get some games digital that I'm like, oh, okay, I might not have a strong affinity for it. Just go ahead and get it digital or whatever though. But if it's a game such as like a big major Square Enix game, like a Final Fantasy or something like that, or maybe it's like a Dragon Quest 12 in the future, if they have it physical, I would love to get it though. But I'm not going to be too opposed to getting more games digital nowadays, just considering the way how they got this stuff. Because by the time you deal with a game key card, at that point, I'm like, I might as well just go ahead and download it from the eShop though. But y'all gotta let me know down in the comment section down below, how are all y'all feeling on game key cards? Like, is it rubbing y'all off the wrong way? Is this really gonna be the thing that's gonna start pushing a lot of y'all to just go ahead and invest a little bit more so in the digital age versus physical and stuff like that though? I mean, obviously with the Switch 2 being a hybrid system, taking it on the go and stuff, having more of your games digitally just kind of makes more sense. You can just kind of move around and stuff instead of, you know, juggling around like a little bit of a case or something like that, and just popping through all your Switch cartridges and stuff and being like, okay, this is the one I need to play, and then stick it up in there. Y'all just let me know in the comment section down below. But that's gonna basically do it in terms of today's video though. So if you really like this video, make sure you're gonna hit that like button, go ahead and hit that subscribe button and that bell to stay up to date on all things video game related I feel like talking about and discussing those. So remember y'all, until whatever video I make next, see y'all.